But the purpose really of today is to talk about tips, tricks for Excel, bookings, and Loop. Now, Excel is one of those subjects that there is vast amount of information. There's so many things you can do within Excel. But actually, again, with such a wide audience, we are today going to cover some sort of basic Excel things, which maybe some of you are pretty familiar with, but also some sort of interesting advanced things that maybe you aren't aware of. So I apologize in advance if some of the stuff I show you is a bit normal, but we kind of need to cover that grounding just for those people on the call that maybe don't use Excel. But bookings and Loop might be two things that you've not heard of, but I think you'll probably walk away seeing the value inside what those are. So in order of agenda, we're going to talk about bookings, we're going to talk about Excel, and then we're going to talk about Loop. We're going to give you a few links to go and find out some more information about these topics, as well as obviously we encourage you to go back to our website, look at all the previous webinars and bits and pieces that we've done in this series, because there's lots of things in there about Teams and about PowerPoint and Word and all the other bits and pieces that we've done previously. And we're also going to have a bit of time for questions at the end. Something that I want to add to that is just any ideas that you have about things that you'd like us to cover in this series, then please reach out and let us know, and we'll see if we can incorporate it. Okay. So just as a heads up, for those of you that are new to the series, this will go quite quickly. So I do kind of rattle through this pretty fast. The reason being, just because I want to cover as much as we can in the period of time we've got. So don't worry if you don't keep up. You know, we will make this available online. You can go back and watch this. You can go and jump into YouTube or via our website, and then kind of pause and rewind and bits and pieces. So if it doesn't quite sink in today, don't worry too much. We'll share the link so that you can come back and watch it later on. But the aim really is just to cover as much stuff as we can. So apologies for the pace if I do go quite quickly. Okay. So something we'll start with then is Microsoft Bookings. Now, how many of you have even heard of Microsoft Bookings? Have you ever used it? Maybe you haven't. It's one of those apps that is hidden. So we have to go into the waffle and into all apps and bits and pieces to find bookings. But there's two amazing things about bookings. If any of you use Calendly, then this is very similar. Okay, this allows you to give you that functionality to allow people to book meetings into your diaries. Okay, and we can also configure booking things for the whole business if required. So let's have a little look at what that looks like. Here I'm in my kind of Office 365 admin portal, in my portal, and I'm going to go to all apps and I click on bookings, and it'll bring up a kind of a blank bookings page, and you can see that we've got two options: personal booking pages and we've got shared booking pages. Okay, and under my personal booking page, I've got these two events: a 30-minute meeting and a 15-minute meeting. If I click on that, a 30-minute meeting, for example, this is something that I could issue out to other people and invite them to click on. It will make sense in a minute as we go through it, but I'm going to set a 30-minute meeting. The location is going to be a Teams meeting. I'm going to make this public so anybody in the world can see it. And then I'm going to put the times in my diary that I want to make myself available for people outside of my organization to book an appointment with me. Once I've done that and I configure my meetings, we've got a 15-minute one there. I can create as many of those as I like. It doesn't matter. I can create a brand new one for whatever set of time, change those time options, whatever I need to do, invite certain people or not make it public or private to certain people. Once I've done that, we got to personal booking page and we copy it, we stick that in a new tab. And what you'll find there is it's created a publicly accessible booking URL. Right? Now you can shorten that and you can stick it on the bottom of your emails. So you can say, book a meeting with me, for example, if you're in a sales capacity. And your end users or your customers will be taken to this page where they can choose to book a 30-minute meeting or a 15-minute meeting with you. It will then show availability based on my calendar. So based on my calendar, I have an Outlook. You can see that I don't have any availability at certain times. If I pick the second, I'm only available at 13:30 there. On that day, I've got availability at in two slots in that time period. And if I wanted to, I could pick a date, pick a time, hit next as a customer, and I can choose to go off and book that with me if I wanted to. Okay, so for those of you that use things like Calendly, very similar. Okay, there's a slight difference. There is another way of doing it. Now, this is a bit more complicated, and I'm going to set this one up slightly because it might take a little bit of explaining. But let's imagine for a second that I am an amazing barber. You'll tell that I'm growing my beard for those of you that know me. So I'll probably need to go to the barber, to be fair. So, what we can do is something called a shared booking page. Now, what this is a kind of a calendar for our whole organization. So the example I'm going to give you is that we're going to use Scott's Cuts, a hairdresser, all right? So let's talk through this. So I'm going to create a booking page. I'm going to create a brand new one from scratch, and I'm going to call it Scott's Cuts. Now, I can choose a business type, and it will give me some sort of suggestions on branding and bits and pieces around my public booking page, similar to what I had a minute ago. But I can also put my business hours in. I can search for people that are going to be kind of agents or people that are going to be used on this calendar. That'll make sense in a minute. And then we can start to add services. Now, I'm going to say that a haircut in my scenario is going to take 45 minutes. It's definitely not a Teams meeting. It's available Monday to Friday, 9 till whatever time. All right. I'm going to allow anybody in the world to come and book that appointment with me, or I can do it online effectively, or I can just force it to happen on a till. So if I don't have an online presence, I just need people to come in and book an appointment, and they go away and they come back in again, or they phone me up. I can just do it through there if I want. And what it's going to do is create effectively a booking system for my business, for Scott's Haircuts. Right? Scott is the only hairdresser currently. It might be that we've got 4 or 5 other hairdressers in. And what it's then going to allow us to do is aggregate all of those calendars together and deliver that to our end customer, so our customers can book appointments with us with the right people, with people that have availability. Okay, so you can see here it's created me a link again. So if I effectively stick that into a web browser tab, what we have is a calendar view. Okay, so we've got, this is kind of our management area for bookings for all of our customers. This is the public page they might hit. It's called a 30-minute meeting. Maybe I should call that something else. We'll do that in a second. But the customer can choose the person, maybe choose the hairstylist they want to work with. They can then browse through a calendar to find some dates. Obviously, this is August; those dates have gone. But here you can see a whole bunch of appointment times that can be booked in. All right, and as I move forward a month, then there's obviously other dates available to me. I can pick a date and I can choose the times that Scott's available to book, and then I can fill some information in and actually book that appointment. So you can see that if I was actually running my own barber shop, this is a very, very simple way of me allowing myself to take bookings, assuming I'm going to get paid. There's no payment stuff built into this, but it allows me to take a booking, put it into a calendar and expect an appointment, expect a customer to turn up as part of an appointment. That will send an email off to the customer saying you've booked this appointment with Scott's Cuts, and on we go. Now, if we have a look at the calendar, if we start to look through that, you can see that it shows all of my calendar appointments. So everything that I'm doing, my day-to-day job, is coming up as effectively appointments in here. And as I scroll through, we need to go all the way through. You should find eventually something that's relevant to this calendar. So I think we just check what the date is. It's the 11th, so we need to go one more day. So there's that 30-minute meeting that was booked with John Smith. That's what we just booked online. That's now been put into my diary. It's now available to all my colleagues to see within this booking environment. I can go and edit that appointment, and you can see that it's got my customers' information. It's what they filled in that form at the bottom, and who the member of staff is that's being booked against it. If that was somebody else, if that was Sam, then the customer could have chosen between Scott or Sam. If I choose customers, it also starts to collect all of my customers' information. I get a CRM system built within Bookings that actually contains and lists all of my customers' information and their contact details and bits and pieces. I can view my list of staff. And of course, I can also go in and edit those services. Now, 30-minute meeting is probably not the right name for a haircut appointment. So of course, I can come in and change that if I need to. I can rewire that so that actually it says something like gents haircuts would be the most sensible thing to have in there, perhaps, right? So as you can see, a really, really powerful tool to allow us to actually take bookings online. Now, these sorts of services are typically being paid for. You're probably paying for Calendly. You're possibly paying for third-party services and booking platforms and tools like that. I'm going to remind you that this stuff is baked into Office 365, all right? This is coming as part of your 365 subscription. So actually, tools. Now, I'm not going to pretend it's the best booking system on the planet. There's probably better things out there. But if your requirement is fairly small, maybe you just need to book appointments with your sales team for your customers. Maybe you want to be able to send out personal appointments on the bottom of your calendar so that people can contact you and talk to you. This is probably going to meet the need. Okay, so absolutely something to take a look at. It's very hidden. Lots of people don't even know it's there. So bookings, I encourage you to go and have a little look at that. So let's talk about the big one. So Excel is probably our main topic of conversation today. And as I say, I'm going to apologize in advance that some of the things that we're going to go through initially could be quite basic. to some of you, okay? There'll probably be some new bits in there that you didn't know you could do or how to do those things, but we're going to start basic and just kind of get a bit more advanced. So bear with me if that's all right. So first thing to talk about is formulas, all right? How do we do a basic formula? For those of you that have never used Excel before, you can see here that we've got a list of data. These are numbers that effectively have been dialed or activity on a phone system. So what we've done is we've exported a log of numbers, and then we've kind of registered the start time and the end time. And these calls are potentially calls from our service desk, let's say, for example, all right? But what I want to know is what's the duration, all right? So I've got the start time of the call, I've got the end time of the call. So how do we actually create a function? Very, very simply. So I'm going to give it heading. The key thing here is that equals sign. That means we're going to do a formula, all right? And what I've done is I've gone equals the end time minus the start time. And what that does is it calculates the gap between the two. And clicking on the little green dot and dragging that down allows that formula to be replaced into every single cell. So effectively, it's calculating the call duration across every single one of those lines, all right? Very basic, but if you've never used Excel, that's how you make a formula. Converting text into columns. This is a slightly more interesting one. So for those of you that, for example, in this scenario, we've got some kind of bunches of text there. Those call start times have dates and times in them. So actually, what I want to do is just understand the timing between the two. And then what I'm going to do is try and break that 2024-08-28 at the top line there, and it says 1510 in cell C2 for those Excel experts. We're going to break those things up. So let's play for this video. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to right click on there, and I'm going to insert a new column, and this says call start time. Okay, we're going to do the same thing in a second. So, oh, sorry, yeah, perfect. So we're going to basically break it out from our time into our date and our time. That's what we're aiming for here. So we're going to do the same thing over here, call end time, and that's going to be our call end date. And then what we're going to do is we're going to click on this option here. We're going to select the whole column, and we're going to go data, and we're going to go to text to columns. And what we can do here is choose the thing that delimiters. So we've got a space between those two options, all right? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to choose a space. Don't worry about the rest of the bits and pieces. But when I choose next, you can see that it's just broken that cell into two columns, all right? It's always going to replace the one on the right-hand side. So again, when I do this, we're going to choose space, and it's going to break my date and my time and put them in two separate pieces. As you can see now, we've got column C with a date, column D with a time, column E with a date, column F with a time. And our calculation now is a bit wrong because actually we're looking at the wrong fields. So we need to go and correct that. We need to go and click in that, change that formula, drag it back down again, all right? So text to columns is very useful. Also very useful if you've got things like, if you've taken a file, without getting too technical, JSON files, you export a big CSV, it's got loads of data in it, but it doesn't render properly inside Excel. Or you've got text that's got colons between it. Maybe you've got a bit of information in the colon and a bit of information in the colon. But you can split that into different columns by selecting the delimiter, the icon or the character that separates each piece of data. You just highlight it, text the columns, set what the delimiter is, and it will break that string out into various bits and pieces. So, customizing your view. What we have here then, same set of data. What effectively we're looking at is, if I go and select some stuff, bear with me a second. When we're scrolling around in Excel, you can find that you've got lots and lots of rows and lots of columns. And sometimes if we scroll, we're going to have an issue. But we have this idea of freezing panes, okay? What that means is that if I were to scroll down traditionally, I might lose my headers and they'll just disappear off the top. So by the time I'm looking at the bottom set of data, I effectively don't know what those headings are. By choosing freeze panes, so you go to view and then freeze panes, you can freeze the top sort of row, you can freeze a column so you can scroll sideways, and it will lock that view into the Excel view so that you can scroll up and down, you can scroll left and right, and effectively your headers are still in the right place. All right, so that's always very, very useful, especially when you're looking at large data sets. Again, I'm sure lots of you know this stuff already, all right? It is going to get more interesting, I promise you. Combining cells in separate workbooks. So here we go. We've got, effectively here, we've got, let's say I want to type there a user's full name, right? Something to bear in mind here is that I could go out and use a formula, but if I'm feeling lazy, I can just write john.a.smith, right? Oh, look at that. That's interesting, isn't it? What it's done is automatically worked out the formula, the way that I typed to the top, and said John A. Smith, and it's basically filling in the various bits and pieces based on the information and the style of the writing above. So bear in mind, Excel does this. It's pretty clever stuff, right? We've also got information from another spreadsheet. So I'm going to let this play and then I'll explain what it's doing in a second. So if I go and insert this row in, what I now want to do is say that I want to kind of do a lookup effectively. All right, I want to understand we've created those usernames on the other page. We've created John and all the other bits and pieces. And we had user 1 and we user 2, user 3. What we're going to do is use something called an X lookup to allow us to go and look at that data in another spreadsheet. So we go X lookup, all right, and we're going to go A2. So we're looking at that value of number 1, and I'm looking across this other data in another data set. What I'm asking it to do is find employee number 1 and return the value of the full name, all right? Complicated formula. I'm not going to talk through it at the moment, but it is fairly straightforward when you work it out. Basically, you're saying, this is the cell I want it in, this is the field or the range of data I want, these are the values. Either put that value in or put not applicable. Once I've created that for me, you can see I can drag it down. Everywhere it says user 1, it'll come out with John. Everywhere it says 4, 6 is Laura, 7 is James, and that information is all coming from that other spreadsheet. Okay. Again, I'm going through this at pace. I appreciate if you don't keep up, don't worry. Go back and watch this again a little bit later, and hopefully it will make a little bit of sense to you. We've also got conditional formatting. All right, so this is a really, really useful thing. If this is calls, let's say, to our service desk, the aim here for us would be to make sure that we are kind of in the nicest possible way. You know, we love you loads, but we want to get you off the phone as quickly as possible. We want to fix your support issue as fast as we can. So actually, what I want to do is highlight in this scenario all those cells where the call talk time was probably a little bit too high, or perhaps make it green where it's a bit too low. So I can do that by selecting all that data, going to conditional formatting, and create a rule that says if less than. So we're going to set a value in there. We're going to say if the call time is less than 4 minutes, all right, then we're going to change that and we're going to say green. So in other words, you had a call with us and we got your issue dealt with within 4 minutes. That's pretty good going. On the reverse of that, we might also want to add some conditional formatting to say if it's greater than, then let's say 10 minutes, then we're going to make that red. Okay, so effectively we've now got a list of data where if the call time is bigger than 10, we're going to get a red bar. If it's fast, then we're going to get a green bar. That's super, much easier to digest in that view. And that's probably a lot of this, you know, is you get your data, and the whole point of Excel is to, you know, manipulate it to make it easier to digest and easier to read. So this definitely makes it easier to read, but I've still got to scroll down loads and loads of data to find out those bits and pieces. So a better way of getting a view is to kind of create a graph, right? So how do we create a graph? Again, I appreciate lots of you might already know how to do this, but effectively what we're going to do here is we're going to select the data that we want to include in our graph. So in this scenario, we've got the username and the talk time, and then I can go and choose all sorts of all sorts of chart options from what we've got at the top. What we're going to do is create a box and whisker graph. This is because each of these users in this scenario, John A. Smith, for example, they will range. They're not always going to do a 4-minute call. Some calls are going to be 20 minutes, 14 minutes in this scenario. Some are going to deal with this as quickly as a minute. But actually, what I want to see is the average between the two. So this is a much better way of me visualizing that data. All right, rather than me scrolling down a list of 200 rows of different bits of data, I can grab all that data and shove it into a graph that gives me more visibility. So I can see here that generally, probably the average call length there might be from Michael, let's say. He's got quite a high call length. Probably some of our fastest people on the call is probably David. You know, that call time on average is a bit lower than some of the other colleagues. All right, so useful way of visualizing data, and that's how you make a graph. So copy and paste, special options. That's something that can throw people sometimes. So let's go and have a little look at this sort of call talk time here. If I copy that, Control C, if I go and paste it somewhere else, what I'm going to end up with potentially is an error. All right, that call time was a formula. It was calculated on the formula. It does have a value, but it doesn't know how to render itself. And if I choose various bits and pieces, you can see when I paste, there's lots of options. I can paste with just the value, the number, the formula behind it, the conditional formatting around it. So you can see, depending on what I pick, I'm getting all sorts of weird values. Now, they're not wrong. They're just not being rendered correctly. It doesn't realize that's a time, all right? It's just giving me some sort of Unix timestamp potentially or something random. So it's important to make sure that we paste out with the right way of doing it. But actually, what you'll also find is if you go and copy a cell that has a formula in it, and you try and paste it somewhere else, you might find you don't get the right value. Okay, and one of the key things there about the third option down, there's a little clipboard with 1, 2, 3. If I only want the value, that's the one I want to use. I want to paste with 1, 2, with a paste with 1, 2, 3. And if the formula has calculated the answer to be 10, let's say, when I copy that and I paste it just with the value, it will just paste the number 10 and it has nothing to do with the formula, rather than trying to shift all the hard work that's going on behind the scenes over as well. All right, so there's a whole bunch of different options around pasting. So just go and explore them, but generally paste with formatting and whatever you need to do and you get it right. Now, I tend to use two, which is that and paste with values. Filtering data. So let's have a look at this one then. So effectively, we go back to that set of data. We've got our chart on the right-hand side. Key thing here, if I select kind of the row that I want to filter on, I can go and choose sort and filter. I can filter that and I get little drop-down menus, all right, under each column. What I can then do is just pick certain people. So if I pick John here, it's going to limit all of my data down to just the information for John. So I can't see any other kind of member of staff's calls, let's say. And notice the graph on the right side's changed. But then actually, I'm only interested really in looking at the calls in the morning, let's say. So let's go and say that actually the call time was effectively before midday. So we go OK, and you can see now we've filtered the data down again. And again, our graph has changed on the right-hand side. So filtering, very, very easy, very useful. If you don't use that inside Excel already, absolutely do it. Again, these are fairly basic pieces, so we are going to move on with some more stuff in a moment. But all of those changes that we were making there, effectively around filtering and grouping, they're making kind of a change to that original raw data, and I'm formatting that raw data. And this is where pivot tables come in. So this is something that we get asked a lot about, is how pivot tables work. So let me try and explain a pivot table to you. So we've got our set of data. All right, but actually what I want to do is not really tamper with this data too much. If I want to make mistakes in it, I just kind of want to leave it on its own. I want to create effectively a view of it over here on the right-hand side somewhere that just kind of calls back and gets the information I want. So let's go and do that. Let's just undo kind of what we were doing a second ago. So let's pull all of our filters back to where we want them. Let's clear all those filters. Wonderful. So we're back to where we were. So what I'm going to do this time is I'm going to select all my data. I'm going to go to insert, and I'm going to go and insert a pivot table. What it's going to ask me for here is, where do you want to create that pivot table? I've said a new worksheet, so I actually get a new page or a new Excel worksheet up. And you can see that what it's done is it's grabbed on the right-hand side pivot table fields. These are all the column headers that we had. And what I'm looking to do here is I'm going to divide by username, so I want everyone's sort of name down the side. And then I'm going to start to drag in some of those key fields, those key bits and pieces I want to know. So I want to know their talk time potentially. And effectively, I can start to layer more columns in there. So I want to make it more complicated. It's going to give me the opportunity to drill down once we're completed here. What's the actual number? So we've put the count of phone numbers. So that's now showing me roughly for the duration of each call we had in terms of the talk time by each individual user, and then summing up or adding together the number of calls that were 2 minutes long, 3 minutes long, 4 minutes long, 5 minutes long, all right? So as you can see, I've not had to go and modify the data in Excel to do this. It's just giving me a view, and I can very easily drag and drop fields in and out of that to end up with the view I want. Again, I can add filters to it. I can do all the things I need to do. Now, probably one of the key things is that when I click on the actual value, it takes me into the data. I can then see that one call that was made by David on the 28th of the 8th. Okay, if I go and click on another one, so over here, we made 3 calls at that time. So they're a bit longer. Why they're sort of, call talk time is sort of 9, 7, 8, 9, 10 minutes. Why are they taking particularly longer? Maybe they're the 3 calls we want to go and dig in and find some more information about and understand why those calls are a bit more complicated. But ultimately, that pivot table allows me to kind of structure, rejig the data. It's all drag and drop, and then really quickly hone in on key information. So pivot table is very cool. Spark lines might be something that you've not seen before or used before, but here I've got a table with the with information from the Met Office, okay, around kind of record daily temperatures, rainfall, things like that. What I've got here is January, February, March, April, May, and a bunch of columns. And what I want to end up with is kind of a little graph to give me visibility. It's very hard to understand the trend inside that sort of raw data. But if I select some cells on the right-hand side, and I go and choose spark lines, and in this scenario, I'm going to do a column. If I choose column, again, it's going to ask me for my set of data. So I'm just going to select the numbers and then hit enter. And then we're going to have a bunch of tiny little graphs, and each of those tiny little graphs are related to the row that they're in line with. Now, it makes sense, doesn't it? So I can see the trend. You can definitely tell that in the middle of the year, the degree C goes up and comes back down again. Makes sense, right? We can relate to that. But we've also got some great little things in there where I can tick the high point or the low point, and that's going to stand out certain bits of information. So I've got the high point flag there. So now the highest temperature per month and the highest value in each of those rows will be flagged as red. Fantastic. If those numbers start to change around, those graphs will just sort of change automatically, and off you go. So Sparkline's really, really useful. They can be, as I say, they can be line graphs, they can be bar charts. There's a whole bunch of options in there in terms of how you look at it. Great when you're doing a bit of sort of financial forecasting, you're trying to understand your trends. Sparkline's really, really useful. Customizing your ribbon, right? So something else that's really useful. If you use the same things inside Excel all the time, so maybe you're a bit of an avid Excel user. This isn't limited, by the way, to Excel, but just thought we'd throw it in here. You do have the functionality to actually customize the ribbon. What do I mean by the ribbon? That's that bar across the top where we've got file, home, insert, and we've got all of our tools and assets and bits and pieces that are underneath it. So what I can do is I can go to file, I can go to options, which you can't quite see there, but it is down the bottom. And I'm going to go to customize the ribbon. And you can see here that these are all the things. So home, insert, drawer, they all correlate to the options you see across the top. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a new tab there. I want to create a kind of a section for my own tools and the only things I do. Really imaginatively going to call it my tab. And then I'm going to rename the bit at the top to my tab as well. And then what I have is the ability to drag tools into that section to make sense in the mode. We've got loads of popular commands, but I can choose all commands. And you can see that there's loads of things in Excel. These are align right. These are kind of make bold. These are kind of add a spark line, add a chart, whatever it is. These are all the things that you can see inside a ribbon under any menu. And what I can do is when I found the ones I want, I can just start to add them across into my tab. So I've added a load of alignment ones. And you can see now in my ribbon, I've got my tab and a bunch of tools that I use regularly. So rather than me digging around trying to go into 5 different places and remember what menu option had X, Y, and Z in it, I can customize it. I can do it myself, right? Depends on whether your administrator, your network admin allows you to do that, of course. But if you can, great. Right. So there was some sort of fairly interesting bits, but you might have kind of used those before. But just to kind of summarize what we had there, effectively, we had flash filling, formulas, converting text to columns, you customizing your view, copying, pasting, creating graphs, filtering data, pivot tables, spark lines, customizing your ribbon. Let's show you some more interesting stuff, all right, for those of you that are Excel experts. So how do we get data off the web into our Excel spreadsheet? Right, you do that by going to a web page. So I'm on Wikipedia here. Anything that's really got a table on it will work. So I've got some climate data for England from Wikipedia. I'm going to copy that URL and I'm going to jump over into Excel. Now, once I'm in Excel, I'm going to go to the data tab, all right, and I'm going to go to get data. There's loads of different things and ways of dragging data into Excel, but I'm going to choose from web and I'm going to paste in that URL that we had and I go, okay. Now, what Excel's going to do is go off and look at that web page and start to analyze it and look for data sets within the web page. There'll probably be quite a lot, in all honesty. And when it will come back, I imagine we'll get a few. So we've got table 1, table 2, table 3. Clicking on them is going to allow us to preview that. But actually, table 1 doesn't have the data we want. Table 2 doesn't have the data we want. Table 3, okay, that looks more familiar. That's sort of the data we want. Now, we haven't got the lovely formatting. We haven't got all the reds and the yellows and bits and pieces. But by selecting load, what it's going to do is Excel's going to go off to that web page and grab all that data out, pull it in, and I've now got a live kind of modifiable and an editable Excel document. So if you're ever sitting there typing stuff in from a website, stop that and just import the data live. Probably some of the key things, again, just to prove that it's live data, I can still filter it, I can kind of sort it, I can do whatever I want with it. It's going to filter it down and show me the average precipitation rate or whatever that was. But on the right hand side, you've got something called queries and connections, right? And if I hover over that, you can see that this is a live link to that data on the web page. So if the data on the web page changes, I can actually refresh it. So I can go to this refresh button and hit refresh all, and it will go off to that web page, grab the data and update my spreadsheet for me live. So if you are sort of grabbing information from other websites, as long as you can get to that website without having to log in, then you should be able to pull that information straight into Excel. And whenever you just need to go back and update it, you don't need to go back to the website. You just hit refresh and it pulls the latest set of data in from that website, as long as the table's the same, it keeps changing. All right. So great way of pulling data in live from a website and getting your data in to start with. Another thing some people don't know is you can actually get data straight out of a picture. So here we have a PDF file, and this is from gov.uk, again on sort of river rainfall and bits and pieces. But if I do the snipping tool, so Control Windows S, I think, off the top of my head, I can kind of snapshot it, and it will go and store that picture in my clipboard. Now, if I paste that into Excel, all I'm going to do is get a picture. All right. Now I can't edit those numbers. I can't change those fields. I can't do anything with that. It's not much use to me. But if I go to data and I go to our get data section, I'm going to from a picture. I can do it from a file that I've got saved, or I can kind of bring a picture in from my clipboard. What it's going to do is Excel's going to look at that clipboard picture, and it said, well, here's the picture, and here's our guess at what we think those values are in each of those cells. So it's actually going to build your table for you off the back of the picture. Wherever it's not sure, it's going to ask you to review these things. So you can see here we needed a space in that one, again a space in that one, but actually that looks pretty good. That looks pretty good, and you can see it's showing me where on the picture it's questioning it. And as we move on, you can see now that that's not right. That says T, and it's actually the number 27. So I'm going to correct that. And this one says 1143. That should be 1148. So I'm going to accept that. Once I've gone through and checked all those things, I can insert that data, click insert data, built my table for me from a picture. So again, lovely way of literally taking a photo of something. You know, if you've got a printout and you're keying in information, if you've got members of staff that sit there taking information and keying it all in, get them to take a photo of it and then just import it as a picture and go through and check and make sure that all values are right. So we'll speed up an awful lot of processes again. So it wouldn't be a webinar without me talking about Copilot, so I had to get it in there somewhere. I'll keep it short and brief, I promise. But basically what we have here is that same data we were looking at earlier on with our Spark runs on potentially. And what we're going to do here is that within Excel, there's loads and loads of functions. There's loads of stuff that we can do, and not everybody knows what all the functions do, okay? But as you can see, this is a list of all the functions available, and there's loads of them, right? So I wouldn't be able to tell you what all those things do. So, but there is somebody who can answer that question for me, surprise, surprise. So, and that is Copilot. And if I don't know how to do something, I can ask Copilot a question. First thing to say, Copilot is a lot more than what we're talking about here. It can create formulas for me. It can kind of read my data, summarize my data. But I'm going to ask it, how do I calculate an average of a data set? Okay, now that's because I'm new to Excel. I don't really know how to use it. Well, Copilot is your friend then, right? So ask it questions. It will come back and tell you how to do things. So in this scenario, let's have a look at our data. I could have asked it a much more complicated question, but it's given me sort of two examples. One of, well, this is how you create an average. This is a formula to create an average. And actually the bottom option is, this is kind of probably more relevant to your data that I'm looking at. So I'm gonna take the easy one. I'm gonna copy that. All right, and I'm gonna go paste it in. So I've pasted in my equals average, tells me it's a formula. And then I need to select the sort of the range of data that I want to position it in. So I'm going to make that start from the number. All right, and it's on 4. So that row, what it's going to do now is average out all the numbers across that row. We end up with a value of 6. Of course, I can drag that down, and I can do bits and pieces with that if I need to. So Copilot is your friend. That's the takeaway. All right, if you don't know how to do something in Excel, just ask Copilot. All right, and Copilot is available. Okay, you don't necessarily need to have a Copilot license. That is Copilot kind of preview that's available there, so it will help you use some of this stuff. If you do have a license, it gets even more powerful. And then finally, let's talk about Power BI. So what we've got inside this environment, see if that plays. Yeah, fantastic. Okay, so what we've got is a bunch of data. All right, so for various bits and pieces. As I scroll this down, you can see there's loads and loads and loads of data, loads of stuff available inside it. All right, and effectively, what we're effectively seeing here. Bear with me a second. I don't quite know what's happening there. Oh, bear with me. It's having a right old wobbly here. There we go. Okay, so what we can do is obviously grab data from Power BI. Although this is absolutely not playing for me at the moment. Give me a second. Okay, I'll tell you what, I'm going to scrap that because it's going to slow me down and I end up with getting too excited. Although that I'm being helped by my amazing marketing person over here. He's hitting play for me. There we go. Right, blank report. Right, so this is part of a Power BI report, Power session that we did last time. Just remember that when you're creating Power BI reports, you can drag that information in from Excel. All right, so I can actually say, here's some data inside a spreadsheet. I can hit OK. So those charts and graphs and bits and pieces that we saw inside Excel become even more powerful inside things like Power BI, and that ability to slice and dice and gather data. Very similar to that idea of connections to a web page, right? This is kind of a Power BI report as a connection to a spreadsheet. That spreadsheet might go and get its data from a website, right? But what this is going to allow us to do is basically say, here's the data, here's our data set, all right? And if I tick that sheet, we're going to end up with all of that data available inside Power BI for me. All right, this is the Excel data that I've got. This can be other things, but we're talking about Excel here, so let's talk about Excel spreadsheets. All right, I can grab all of that. We can load that data in, and effectively it's going to allow us to pull this into a Power BI report, and then I can create much more advanced graphs, slices, dices, bits and pieces like that. It does take a minute for that data to come in, to be fair. So we'll give it a second just to prove that this does work, unlike my play button just a few moments ago. So you can see it's loading that data into something called a model for Power BI. So if you're like kind of really into your Excel, the next natural evolution is Power BI. If you've never used Excel, I'd argue you might want to go and start using Power BI first, actually, because it's probably easier to kind of drag and drop and get your data, get an understanding around. If you're just raw facts and figures and numbers, Excel's probably a good place to start. But if you need, if you're trying to look, if your ultimate game or goal here is to create visuals, I'd argue go look at Power BI. If you're more about the numbers and transforming data, there is something called Power Query, but we'll talk about that another day. Excel's probably a good place to do that in, all right? But as you can see on the right-hand side, we have our data. Here's all those columns, all that data from the spreadsheet we saw just before it all went horribly wrong. And then I can tick various bits and pieces. I can start to drag and drop key bits of information. So my values are going to be the sum of the sales. In this scenario, we're going to drag in country of sales. And you can see that my pie graph basically is much, much clearer. I can say, well, actually, these are all the sales that I've made, the number of sales in each of the counties, or sorry, each of the countries that we transacted. All right, right. I'm not going to linger there. So you've seen that before. If you want to know more about that, then go to that webinar. There is a Power BI webinar all about Power BI. So the last bit I want to talk to you about really is Loop. Okay, so this is fairly transformational in terms of how we collaborate. Today we have the idea of effectively having Word documents, right? We've got collaboration where multiple people can write and edit in the same Word document, make changes. We can see what they're doing. It's all modifying in front of us. It's all live. Loop takes this to the next level. Okay, it allows us to collaborate across multiple things. The big issue we have today is really that when I want to kind of collaborate with somebody, let's say I've got to go and open up a Word document, and that means all that collaboration is happening in Word. But maybe that thing that we're collaborating on has value in other parts. What happens if I want the same data that I'm working on in Word to be sent to someone via an email and allow them to collaborate through the email rather than having to go and open up a Word document? That's what this is all about. It's also a bit of a sort of project management tool. And there's three terms I want you to walk away with: a Loop workspace, a Loop page, and a Loop component. Okay, so let's have a little look at this. This is a Loop, all right? This is effectively a Loop workspace that I'm going to create. So I'm going to create a marketing workspace, and I'm going to go and invite some people into that marketing workspace. So there's only one man for that job, Mr. Smith. So we're going to add him in. All right, and if I want to, I can put some description in. Benefit of time, we'll skip on. What it does is it creates me a really kind of blank environment. So if you use OneNote, kind of similar to that. All right, if you use Notion, which is a third-party product, almost exactly the same thing. So within here, I've created a workspace. What it gives me is the option to create pages, right, and stuff that exists within my page. So let's have a look at what that looks like. So here I've got a blank page. It's the welcome page to my environment. So let's give it a name. Welcome to the marketing Loop. And you can see that I can just start typing in here, a bit like a Word document, right? I can just type stuff in, I can do a / and I can put these sort of what we call loop components in, which are kind of dynamic, rich pieces of content that multiple people can edit. We'll come back to a bit more about that in a moment. I can also create subpages. It's a bit like a folder system that allows me to say, well, we're in the marketing loop, but now actually this is the thing within the marketing loop. And it might be that I'm creating a project brief, a bunch of templates down the bottom. Maybe I want to do that. Maybe I want to create a team decision. That's going to have different components in it. It's giving me a bit of a structure, some ideas, some tables for people to start to put ideas in. We've also got, effectively minuting. So if you've got multiple people minuting a meeting, then you can all minute a meeting at the same time. But this scenario, make it simple. We're going to have a project brief, all right? And I want to come down. I'm going to change the name of that project brief. I'm going to call it new website. Hopefully not another new website. We've got a new website already, but you'd have a meltdown soon, wouldn't you? But we've got some goals, all right? We need to buy a domain name, let's say. We need to do X, Y, and Z. We need to hire a developer. That's a good idea. We've got some kind of team members. So you can see that this is kind of like a really rich, easy to use version of Word that's collaborative, right? It's stored in one place. It's inside a workspace. But the point is it's not my Word document that we're working on. All right, it's our team's Word document. It's an environment, a bit like OneNote, where lots of people can come in and make changes and edit and update, and if they've got permission. But you can create tasks and tick things off. Project deliverable. This component we've got here is effectively when I create a domain purchase, then I add this to Scott. Scott's going to get an email and a task associated with them saying the domain needs to be purchased by the 30th of August, right? And then I can set kind of settings around. Is that to do? Maybe I want to add another value in there called done, right? That's done. So it's kind of about managing my team. It's about collaborating with my team. It's about allowing myself not to be kind of shoehorned into everyone having to use that Word document to collaborate, or everyone has to collaborate through Outlook, etc., etc. This will make more sense as we go on. But let's create another web page. All right, let's use a different thing. Let's go into a template gallery. You see there's loads of different templates. You're not limited to this. You make your own blank vanilla one from scratch. This is just some things that it's thrown up as ideas. A marketing plan would have been a good one to pick, to be fair, but perhaps we choose an issue tracker, and I'm going to use that as a template. So we're going to build our website. We've got some tasks that we need to do. We've handed those off to various people. Now we're actually in development phase. Maybe we need to track some issues and things that are going wrong with it. Pretty fundamental if the website won't load, but let's put that in there as a bit of a joke. Maybe I've got different options and categories that I'm going to use. So for those of you that use Planner, this is sort of treading on the toes of Planner, isn't it? Well, some news for you in a minute that all sort of adds in and links together. So again, we're going to say, right, actually, these tasks don't work. The website won't load. Let's give that to Scott to get fixed, all right? And again, Scott's going to get an email, and all of this is going to be tracked inside our issue tracker loop. So it's kind of a very rich project management tool to some degree that allows us to have much wider collaboration. So let's have a little look at, that's great inside Loop, but how does that breach out into the other applications that we use across the Microsoft stack? So this is a Teams chat, all right? And what you'll have found is that for those of you that are keen, you'll have noticed, sorry, come back, I've skipped on that. We'll go back. There we go. Okay, we'll let that play. Right, so what you'll find inside a Teams chat is effectively I can say, right, hi team, I need some ideas for branding. Can you vote below? I click that little loop icon, and what I get is a bunch of different things that I can add in as a loop component. Not a page, not a workspace, just a component. And this is going to embed itself straight into my Teams chat. But the key thing here is imagine in your mind that ability for lots of people to write on the same document at the same time. Then this is the same thing inside a Teams chat, inside an Excel document, inside an Outlook email. So I'm going to put a bunch of ideas in. So I'm going to say, right, actually, what's our new branding going to be? Red and green, purple and black, black and yellow. Absolutely. I'm trying to remember what I put there. And this is a voting table. So actually, I can come in and say, well, I vote for our new color should be purple and black, like this-ish. So I'm going to go OK. I'm going to send that off, and it becomes this live component. All right, it now exists as its own object, but it's embedded inside my Teams chat. And when other people start to go in and make changes, so the other people in this marketing team chat make changes in there, I'm going to see those changes live in front of me, right? It's basically collaborative inside my document. But the really important thing is that we'll show in a minute is I can grab that component and pull it out and put it in other places. I can put it in a workspace. I can grab that component and put it inside a Word document. So by copying that link in the top right. And it also shows me the top there, you might just spot that it actually has SS, which is Sam Smith. He has access to that because he's in this chat. I can do lots of things about filtering it and all the other bits and pieces, talking about that data view again. All right, we can sort the information, we can do lots of stuff. I can turn it into what's known as a Kanban board if it's the right type of widget. But ultimately, that's the key thing. I just want to get over that you kind of get to these loop components by being inside Teams and hitting the little loop component. You get loads of stuff, tables, paragraphs, if you're just writing text, voting tables, all sorts of things that are in there. So let's take that same component and let's say that actually we've got a member or colleague that doesn't really use Teams, but I want them to be able to collaborate and give their input back into this document or into my table. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go and pick on another colleague within the marketing team. So new branding ideas, I'm inside an email here. What I'm going to do is I'm going to paste that URL that we copied off of my loop component. So there are 3 options at the top, one in the middle, top right, that copies it. When I paste that in, you can see that it just sticks it inside my Outlook email for me, all right? What I'm then going to do is just type, hey, can you vote for the below, please? And you can see that the content of the email has matched everything I just typed in inside Teams because it's live. Every time I go back to this email now, it's going to have the most up-to-date live content inside it. And I'm going to send this off to Louise, for example, right? And when I send it to Louise, she will come in, she will vote, she will cast her opinion, all right, and the information that I see will come back to me live. So let's have a little look across that looks like. So on the right-hand side, we've got that email that I've just sent to Louise. And on the left-hand side, we've got the Teams chat. And just to prove the point, if I start typing inside that email that I've already sent, or Louise types inside it, or Sam, or anybody types inside it, you can see that everywhere across our environment, that starts to update. As soon as I start typing in my email, it starts to update in my Teams environment. If I were to do that inside a loop page or loop workspace, that would all start to update everywhere. So if somebody knew they sent that email about voting, I'd go into my sent items, I'd look at the email I sent to Louise, and there it is, yeah. And all that information inside my email is no longer static. It's no longer as it was when it got sent at that time. It's all about how up to date and accurate it is based on the collaborative effort that's going on across the business. So there's multiple ways of using that, right? Some people will be going, oh man, I've got enough data as it is everywhere. Then it might be that Loop's not the right thing for you. But actually, I find it really useful when I need to brainstorm with my colleagues. So I'll put a loop component in with a table, and I'll list out a load of information that I need, and I'll go, hey, everybody, can you check that? Can you add this to this list? Have I missed anything? And people are free just to key it back in again. I leave it 24 hours, I go back to that Teams chat, and I look, and there's a big list of stuff. It doesn't require me to go and create a Word document, create a table, share it with everybody. Then everybody's got to go and open up Word and open that document and key that into a table. This is much faster and much quicker. You do it on my phone. That's probably another key thing because it's all because it's in Teams, it all kind of renders correctly. So really, really useful.